Today is July 5th, 2006. I am Jessica Clark. It is a pleasure to conduct the interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Rugby, North Dakota. To begin with, can you state your full name?
Valentine, with initial F, Brossart.
Okay. Does the F stand for anything?
Frank,
Frank? Valentine Frank Brossart. And when were you born?
September 4th in 1926.
Where were you born?
Out in a little farmhouse by Rugby, North Dakota.
Okay, but how far from Rugby was that?
Probably 5 miles,
Okay.
6.
Did anybody ever tell you a story about your birth? Was a midwife present, or a doctor, or?
Well, that's kind of a funny story. My mother told me. Said I wouldn't let her go to the hospital. I had farming in my head from the day I was born. I wouldn't let her go to the hospital. I had to be born right there in that little farmhouse. She didn't make it in time.
So she wanted to go to the hospital, but it was just so
She
fast.
probably would if she had died. But
if you would have let her.
there must have been a farm wife there. I didn't learn all that stuff.
Okay. Okay. What is some of your earliest memories? Some of your first memories.
Of what?
From when you were a child.
Well, naturally the farm, of course. Growing up and waking up in that little farmhouse in the mornings and too lazy to get dressed sometimes and run around in your underwear for a while till Mom made you dress.
So what was the farm like back then?
Well, of course, they farmed with horses then, and I was, like my mother said, I started working on the farm quite early, and drove horses and stuff. I liked them. Yeah, I still have memories of the farm where I grew up, yeah.
What type of work would you do on the farm when you were a kid?
Well, of course, then we milked cows, but I didn't milk cows right away. But as I grew a little older, that was the first job that had to be done every day. Feed chickens and chores like that, clean barns.
How many times a day would you milk cows?
Once in the morning, once in the evening.
Did you have a machine that did it, or was it all by hand?
Not at that time, no. You had to milk by hand, and then you had to separate the milk and turn the crank for the separator. The milk, the skim milk you fed to the calves and pigs, and the cream you sold. That's what it was all about. That was the living in those days, mostly. Selling cream, especially during the 30s.
So would your mom take the cream into town to sell it, or?
My parents, yep.
Okay.
It was put in the cream can, and certain times I took to town. The cream check and bought the groceries.
You mentioned that you took care of chickens on the farm.
Mm-hmm. I always had a few chickens and even turkeys in those days. But chickens was the main thing.
Were those used for food, or?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. We still talk about that. There's nothing like a spring chicken cleaned and.
So how would you go and round yourself up some chicken for dinner? I mean, what did that process entail?
A lot of times they'd clean them quite early in the morning and have them for dinner, a few. But there was a certain time they'd clean a whole bunch, of course, and put them away. Of course, in that time we didn't have no freezers or anything, such thing, to keep things either. So you couldn't butcher all that many and keep them.
How would you keep things cool without having a fridge or a freezer?
That's a good question. It was hard to do, but a lot of times they had these open wells, dug wells by hand, and they'd have certain ropes and stuff and hang it down the ways to try and keep it cool. That was one way of doing it.
Did it work? I mean,
Oh yeah, it helped keep your milk and cream cool and anything else. In later years, we did build a milk house, what we call an ice house. We dug a hole in the ground and filled it up in the wintertime with water and froze it so it was a solid ice in the bottom of that little shed.
And how long did that keep once the summer came around?
That ice kept a good part of the summer till later on in the summer. And that Ma thought that was really something. You could set things down the ice. That's where we kept our cream, that was separated.
So how did you, I mean, how deep was it?
I'd say the hole was about 8 feet deep, and then he had this little building on top. That's where we kept done the cream separating and all that stuff, or milk separating, I should say. It was right by the barn,
So
or close to it.
How did you dig a hole that deep? Was it,
Oh, it wasn't easy with the spade and throw it out. Then it was cemented out, of course. Yeah.
what other types of animals did you have on the farm besides chickens and the cows to milk?
Cows, the horses, of course. We farmed with horses.
Okay.
That I started farming with horses. I've worked a lot with horses in my childhood days.
How many horses did you have on the farm?
Oh, I suppose he had about 16 horses or something like that to exchange. 8 horses it took to pull a 3-bottom plow.
So what's a 3-bottom plow? I don't know much about farm equipment.
You know what a bottom is? Did you ever see him walk along with a pitcher walking with? Well, that's one bottom.
Okay.
So, in other words, this was a 3-bottom thing put together.
Okay.
Then it took 8 horses to pull that.
You would harness, would there be like in 2 and then 2 and then 2, or how would you?
About 4.
4.
And then 4 ahead of the other 4.
Okay. And then what other types of horsepower farm equipment did you use?
Oh, everything you'd done, then you'd have to seed it. You had 4 horses on a drill, sometimes 6. Or disc and different types of implements. And, of course, haying, you had 2 horses on the mower. I got pictures of that.
That would be great. I'd love to see those.
And hay rake, that was my first thing. I stood on the hay rake. It was too small to run the levers to dump it and all that stuff. So I stood on the hay rake, and that was my job, to rake hay with 2 horses on there. And, of course, a binder in those days they thrashed, so you had a grain binder. Took 4 horses to pull that when you harvested the grain.
So how long would the thrashing part of harvesting do? I mean, how long did that last?
Well, everybody bindered first their crop, and they shocked it and all that, and then it sat. Then there was probably different areas, or there's probably 6, 8 people that waited for this one person that had a thrashing machine. One person in the area usually had a thrashing machine. And he'd go out and he'd do all the thrashing custom thrashing for all the neighboring farmers. I don't know, it all depended on 6, 8, 10, 15 farmers got thrashed that way.
So what were your hours that you would put in out in the field during the typical harvest time? I mean, what time would you get out there, and how late would you stay out there?
Well, with horses, you had to limit it a little bit. They're a little bit different than tractors. 7 o'clock was usually unhitching time. They called it pull the pin.
Pull the pin.
Yeah. And they'd rest horses about 2 hours at noon. And in the morning, they'd probably try and start about 8. So with horses, you could only go so long. You know, they could only take. Some people had different ways of doing things. Some had more horses, what they call spare horses, at home in the barn, and then they'd change them off during the day so they could keep going. Unhook 4 on the binder and hook 4 new ones on. different ways of doing things.
Do you remember when your family switched from horsepower farming to tractors and machines?
Very well, 1940.
So like when your dad first got a tractor?
Yep.
Well, how did that change your family's life?
Well, it was quite a change, all right. And then next came the combine. About a year or two later, after you had a tractor, then came the combine. That was really a change. The family done all the harvesting then. Before that binding and thrashing, that was all a lot of work. And especially when the thrashing machine came around. A big thrashing crew to feed and all that stuff. Although they usually had their own, what they call cook car, with the thrashing rake, where there was a cook right in the cook car.
Really?
And make the meals, yeah, for the thrashing crew.
So what type of meals would you have when you were out there?
Mostly, I suppose, things like roast beef or chicken. A lot of chicken in those days, spring chicken. And potatoes, of course, we grew up in meat and potatoes. They called it German meat and potatoes. Krauts.
The best food.
They'd done some real cooking. Then the pies, they baked a lot of pies in the cook car. They still talk about them today. They were fed good. They made sure they fed good, the thrashing crew.
We were talking about, before we started, about how hot it's supposed to get today. How hot was it when you guys when you were out there threshing and harvesting the crops?
Harvesting was hot all the time, kind of itchy. But by the time thrashing come, it didn't get quite so hot anymore. That got to be later a year. It usually got into September by the thrashing days come, most of them. So it wasn't quite so hot. Oh, it'd get warm some days. But some days it was kind of cool, thrashing. Most of us slept in the barn upstairs, thrashing crew. That was laying the hay. It was hard work, but it was fun work for a bunch of guys and hauling bundles. You know how a thrash machine worked?
Not really. I've seen pictures of them, but I don't really know much about it.
Well, each thrash machine had so many bundles, wagons, and each bundle wagon had their one guy on it to run it or to load it up first and take it into the thrash machine and dump it. And depends on the size of the thrash machine. Most of them were around 7 bundle haulers to a thrash machine. And they all had to take their turns as they come in and unload. You were pretty well fixed to that. If you didn't load up a good load or didn't get in time, you heard about it.
So it really is a lot of teamwork when you're out there doing that.
Oh yeah.
So, how many kids were there in your family?
In my family, there was 4.
4?
4.
How many boys?
2 of us, 2 of each.
2 of each?
And there was, I should take that back, there was an older boy, but he was kind of an invalid. He didn't live too long.
Oh, what was wrong with him?
Well, like you said a little while ago, I'm not sure. Nobody knew what was wrong. I think it was a childbirth.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Because they didn't have a doctor. They had these midwives, and sometimes they made mistakes, I think, or something. I'm not sure.
What was his name?
Jack.
Jack. And how old was he when he died?
I think he got to be 33, something like that.
Okay. What was your brother's name?
My other brother, Daniel.
Daniel. And is he your older brother or younger brother?
No, he's the younger one.
He's the younger one?
He's the baby of the family.
So and then you have 2 sisters. Are they older or younger?
They're all younger. I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest.
Yeah.
And what are your sisters' names?
Frances was behind me, and then Genevieve.
So, okay. So would Frances and Genevieve also be out there helping do the
Some things, yeah, a lot, especially milking.
Okay.
That was everybody's job, help milk cows. And out in the fields, yeah, the girls would after I graduated from raking hays, that's for some of their jobs sometimes, to rake hay.
So when you guys got the tractor, who got the privilege of driving the tractor?
Yeah, it was kind of a privilege for me to get to drive. But that was Dad's job. I was just still a young boy at that time.
So you mentioned that the girls would help out in the field. Would the boys help in the house with the household chores, or was that just the girls?
Not much. Some, yeah, if you had to. But that wasn't the style too much. The style was in those days, that's a women's job.
Mm-hmm.
Even milking cows. A lot of men wouldn't milk cows, or didn't milk cows. I shouldn't say they wouldn't. But that was the ladies' job, to get the cows milked in a lot of families.
Huh. You mentioned that usually you'd be out in the field by 8 a.m. So what time in the morning would you guys get up? When does your day start?
Depends on what you're doing. Now, if we're talking about harvesting at home, just on their own, you'd probably get up 6:37, and them horses had to be fed and they had to be harnessed up and cleaned and got ready when you worked with horses. But in the thrashing time, like I said before, by that time it got to be September most of them, and the days got shorter. You'd be up in the dark getting your team ready and have breakfast, so by the time daylight come around, so you get out there and get going.
So since threshing time was in September, did you have to miss school to help with the farm work?
If you were, yeah, a lot of us did, yeah. They needed you, but school, of course, was important too. Like me, I was glad if I just got to stay home.
Didn't really enjoy the school days, did you?
Yeah, I shouldn't say that, but didn't enjoy him too much, no. I didn't get too many days of education. I only had 8 years out in the country school. I never got to high school or anything.
Was the country school close to your farm, or
1.25 miles.
how did you get to school?
Walk, a lot of run. And a lot of time, like in the wintertime, we got hauled. There was a lot of neighbors around. They'd get together and help each other out and haul the kids to school when it was too cold and miserable. We got hauled with horses and team a lot, sled.
So since it's a country school, I imagine that there were just one classroom with all grades in one classroom.
That's right. Yeah.
How did that work? How would a teacher teach 8 grades at one time?
Well, usually you had your turn by her desk. She had a bench by her desk, and then she'd call, like, first grade, come up please, second grade, come up please, and then she'd give them lessons then, or steady their lessons and things like that. And of course, a lot of times she was in front of the whole room giving instructions too. Then the blackboard was right in front of you all the time. She'd have the blackboard where she'd give instructions on or teach things, yeah.
What subjects did she primarily teach when you were?
In those days it was arithmetic, reading, writing, and the most important ones. We didn't get into as many as they do now, different things. But writing, reading, arithmetic, yeah.
What was your least favorite subject?
You had to ask that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one it was. I think it was that grammar or something like that, it seemed to me. I liked history. I always liked it. I still do.
Did you have the same teacher for all 8 years, or did
No.
you get new teachers?
No. Yeah, every year that teacher was rehired. And then, of course, a lot of times, I think one teacher I had stayed there probably 4 years. She was a good teacher, and she did. But then I must have had 3 or 4 other ones the rest of the years. Every fall, or no, not in the fall, they hired in the spring. They'd hire a teacher, of course. And And sometimes they got married and ran off or things like that, you know. Yeah, it's country, they hired them.
Were they women or men?
Mostly women where we were. I never knew of a men teacher, but they did have men, I guess.
Um, the population in the school, was it primarily German Russian or were there other ethnicities there?
Depends on locality you were at. Where we grew up, north of Rugby here, it was mixed pretty much. There was more non-Catholics than there was. We're Catholic, I'm Catholic, and I think there's probably only 2 or 3 families that were Catholic, and at times, the later years, there's probably just us, one Catholic. That was kind of a sore spot when there was different religions and different nationalities in the school. Every time there was a little squabble, that would come up.
So, how would did they discuss religion at all in school, or was that just a topic?
Not in school.
Not in school?
Among us kids we did sometimes, but not in school.
How about the holidays like Christmas and Easter? How were those celebrated in school, or were they celebrated in school?
Oh yeah. Well, they were just like now, like nowadays. We had Christmas program. That little one-room schoolhouse, they piled in just like sardines at Christmas program time.
So would you have, would the children put on a skit or something for the parents, or?
Yeah, the whole school would
school.
put on a little program,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
The whole neighborhood would come.
How about the community out near your farms and stuff? If the school was mixed, I'd imagine the community was pretty mixed then as well. Not just German Russians in the neighborhood.
Yeah, neighborhood was mixed.
When did school start back then?
You mean the year?
Yeah.
Usually in September, first part of September.
And when did it usually come to an end?
Well, when did May, I suppose, yeah.
You mentioned that sometimes you would have to be held out for farming. How was the attendance when you were growing up for school?
It wasn't too bad, I guess, but some of us were worse off than others. And some of those kids, they never were kept home. But
How many kids were there about in the school that you went to?
the first years when I started, I think there's up in the 20 some. But then it kind of thinned out. By the time I got out of the 8th grade, I think there's only 14 in that one-room schoolhouse.
So how many people were in the same grade you were?
2 of us,
Okay.
me and another guy. He left me now.
Do you remember some of the family names that attended that school?
Oh yes, lots of them.
What was noon hour or recess like?
15 minutes in the mornings. And it depends on the time of the year, the season. You had an hour noon regularly and 15 minutes in between later on at noon. But in the winter time, instead of starting school at 9 o'clock, they'd delay it a half hour and start at 9:30 because it was winter and hard to get there. And then we only got a half an hour for noon. So you had to take that half hour off at noon to make up for that 1 hour later in the morning. That's the time of the school. Regular it was 9 o'clock school time.
What type of activities would you do during your recess hour?
Oh, baseball, a lot of times, pum-pum pull away, different games.
What's pum pum pull away?
We just talked about that, the kids, I think they had it in here. Oh, it was a game, you had 2 sides, and then, how do I explain it? You had to get out and tag and get them back in, but if you got tagged, they had a prisoner space, what they call a prisoner space on their side, And you had to stay in that prisoner space spot right where the team was almost. And then somebody else had to sneak over there and tag you and get you back out. In the meantime, if they got tagged, they got into prison too. And it was, and kicked the can. We had an old barn in our schoolyard. Us didn't do so much anymore, but in earlier years, the kids would come to school with their horses. Then they had this barn there to keep their horses during the day. And there we'd keep the can around this barn. There was somebody hitting one end. Probably know how that works.
I've never played kick the can.
Well, anyway, there was the one that was in one end of the barn, watching this can. And he'd walk back and forth and try and catch somebody peeking. Then if you could sneak up and kick that can when he wasn't looking, whatever, then you had to score.
So it's another kind of tag game.
Something like that, yeah. I don't know, what else did we have? Fox and the Goose when it snowed was a game. And then we had the hills close by. Still there, we just talked about that the other day. I go by that place every day. There was some pretty steep hills, two sets of one on the one side and one on the other. And at noontime, that's the first thing we ran for. We'd have our sleds in school and slide down those hills and have fun out there. The only problem was there wasn't much time. And sometimes we had the teacher up in the air because the bell rang and we didn't get back in time. But we'd done a lot of that in the wintertime. Out to the hills we'd go and slide down. Then the hills was a schmoot you could almost slide down from using them.
So with the sleds, were they homemade? Were there something you made at home?
Some were, but a lot of them were just like we got now, these little play sleds, whatever you call them. Yeah, had a lot of them. Everybody had their own sleds, brought them. Skis, some people had skis.
What about the baseball equipment for bats and balls? Were those actual baseballs, or were they actually homemade?
No, they were actual.
Okay.
That we done a lot of playing baseball. Once the snow left and all that, then.
Did everybody have baseball gloves and?
No, we never had no such thing as a glove.
Just used your bare hand.
Couldn't afford them. Yeah, ball and a bat is all we needed, all we had.
So did it hurt your hands to catch those balls, or?
Oh, yeah, sometimes.
So would you make your own bases up?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, you made them, but that was their permanent almost. Once you started, you had it. They were there.
Was it something girls participated in as well, or was it just boys?
Yeah, the girls were playing baseball too. Yeah.
When you were going to school, was it common for girls to wear pants, or would they only wear dresses?
No, they were, especially in the wintertime when it was cold. Yeah, a lot of them had pants on.
Did you wear?
They called them what they call snowsuits, I guess, or something like that.
Would the boys wear a lot of bib overalls, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bib overalls are like I have on now.
Okay. What would you take? How would you take your lunch to school?
I had a regular lunch pail, but a lot of them had just gallon pails.
Okay.
That was a common thing in those days, a gallon pail.
And then what types of things would you take for lunch?
Sandwiches, and then we had that old furnace in the schoolhouse, and it was rigged up with a little thing in tops that you could set we called it hot lunch. You'd have a little half-gallon syrup pail and have probably soup, or a lot of them had chocolate, cocoa. A lot of them brought their hot chocolate. And then when it was about half hour or so before noon, we'd all get to set this on top of that old furnace. By the time we ate, it was warm, nice and warm. But the other lunch, we had a lunch pail that was sometimes froze. sandwiches, or a lot of apples and oranges. My mother used to make.
Did your mother have a garden when you were?
Oh yes, yeah, that was her pride.
Who helped take care of the garden?
By hand, hoe, plow it with the horses.
What type of fruits and vegetables did she primarily grow?
Well, we always had a lot of potatoes and tomatoes, watermelons. For some reason, they raised a lot of watermelons in those days. And all kinds of things, carrots, onions and stuff.
Did she do a lot of canning?
Yeah.
Is that something that you would help with, or just the girls? Or
Most of the girls.
the girls?
I have to admit, I did. I got snuck out of housework a lot.
How about the butchering? Would you help with the butchering?
Oh yeah, that something I didn't like too well.
What did that entail?
How'd you butcher?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first you had to kill it and what we call gut it, you know, or a pig you had to clean, scald it. We call it scald it. Scald all the hair off of the pig. You put it in a hot water barrel. You boiled water and put the pig in and scald it, just like you do chickens. You done the same thing with chickens before you pull the feathers. So the hair would come right off. You do that the first thing, and then after that you gutted it, and after that you let it cool a little bit, and you cut it up certain ways after you had it gutted and cleaned and all that.
Did you use pretty much every part of the animal, or were there certain things that that would be discarded?
Most of it was used, but there were certain things you didn't use, of course. Like you gut it, you naturally threw that away, and different other things.
You said you would, the first thing you did would kill the animal. How would you kill the animal? Was it shot or?
Yeah, mostly by a rifle, you shoot it.
How about making sausage? Would you help with that, or did your family do that?
Mm-hmm.
How did you do that?
We still do that. I still do that. Sausage maker. And you mix the meat with whatever taste you got, I guess. There's certain ways of mixing sausage meat. First, of course, you had to grind all the meat up good. You got a little meat grinder. Grind up the meat and mix it with salt and pepper mostly. Depends on how you liked it. Some put a little beef meat in there, so forth, or how fat you liked it.
What type of sausage did your family make when you were growing up?
We called it pork sausage.
Pork sausage. Let's see. How about?
Then we had to, I should take that back, we had different kinds of sausage too. They'd make head cheese and they'd make what they call blood sausage, you know, kind
Head
of.
cheese and blood sausage.
Yeah. It's pretty much the same stuff, but it's just a little different mix. That's what it amounts to. But that blood sausage, I shouldn't even say that. You know, they kept the blood fresh when they butchered the pig. They stuck it to kill it. And then, of course, it would bleed. And then they'd catch that blood and mix it in the sauce. I knew you'd feel like that. But I tell you, it was tasty when it fresh. After it got old, I didn't like it anymore. But when it was fresh, it was really tasty.
So obviously, you guys had enough animals and vegetables in the garden to sustain your family. You lived off of your animals and your.
In my younger days, pretty much, yeah.
The fields that you were working in, were they? What type of crops was your father in?
In those days, wheat was the main crop, of course, and oats, barley, little corn. That wasn't too much flax. There was flax raised.
So if you had to put a label on the type of farmer your father was, would you say it was a grain farmer or a dairy farmer or diversified, like a little bit of everything, or?
Well, you'd have to say grain farmer or maybe diversified because we had cattle too.
Okay. How many cattle did you have when you were?
Well, at that time it was mostly dairy cattle. A few cows did we didn't milk all that many cows. Every farmer had their cows. Not everyone, but most everybody. That was their living. 8, 10 cows. A lot of farmers. That was.
Let's look at your family for a little bit. Did you know either set of your grandparents?
Hmm.
Let's start with your father's side. Did you know your father's grandparents? Or, I mean, your father's parents?
Just his father.
His father?
My grandmother died when I was born.
What were their names?
My grandfather was John
John.
Brossart.
And
Yeah.
your grandmother?
His wife was Frances.
Frances. What type of a person was your grandpa John?
Kind of a husky guy and pretty stern guy. Those days they were, all of them.
Where did he live in relation to you? Did he live around the area?
Well, it depends on how far you want to take area. When he came over across with his wife. They had one child when he came over. And he landed up down in Napoleon country. They call him from, what do they call it? Emmons County, they always called it. And then from there he moved north to the Orange country. And that was to Sandy. And then from there he moved towards Berwick country. That's over east here, 10 miles or so. And that was the last. From there he moved to town.
So how often would you see him when you were a child?
Quite often when he lived in town. I don't remember him being in the farm, but quite often. In fact, we used to have summer school, what they call summer school in our religion, a couple of weeks. And I'd get to stay there sometimes when I went to summer school.
Did you like staying with your grandfather?
Did I? What?
Did you like staying with him?
It wasn't bad, but wasn't like being home. Yeah, he was kind of stern. You know.
What year did your grandparents come over from Russia?
Well, that'd be my dad's side. I think I'd have to go back and check all that. I don't know if it's. I think they came over around 1900. Okay. My grandpa Brossart. We got a Brossart book that tells all that. And then my mother's side, we're talking about my dad's side.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to get to my mother's side if you want to.
Yeah, let's go to your mother's side. What were their names?
That's why I was over there. They came over in 1910 as a family. My mother was 18 years old already. As a family, plus the rest of them when they came over.
So how many was there when they came over?
Must have been about, I have to count them. It was probably about 7 of them, 7 children and the parents.
Where did they go? Since your mom was 18, did she talk about the journey over?
Lots of times.
How did they get from Russia to here?
In a boat.
In a boat.
2 weeks it took. That was a hard week, she said. A lot of them got sick, she was always talking about.
Where did they go from Russia? Did they go to Ellis Island or?
I've never gotten for sure. I guess they did, or some say they probably come into Canada too and come down here.
Oh, okay.
But I think they come through Ellis Island too. because she always talked about when they first seen that lady with her hand sticking up, then they were happy. They thought they were going to know what she was talking about then.
Did she ever say why the family left Russia?
Yeah. They were starting to get mistreated pretty bad. But the main thing they left was the oldest, or the boys had to go to service. Were supposed to go to service. In fact, they left in a hurry, I guess, the way I understand it, to get out of there so the boys wouldn't have to be in the service. The oldest one, I'm not sure about that. I wonder if he was. I was often wondering if he wasn't in the service already. And they got mistreated. By then things start going the other way already.
Did she ever tell you about what life was like in Russia?
Oh yeah.
What her childhood was like?
A lot of it, yeah.
What was it? What types of things would she talk about?
Well, how they lived, and like these villages. See some of those pictures. I knew all about that when I got there because you always explained that they were in these villages. They weren't out on farms there, of course. They lived in these villages, and they all had their own village. There was a different village. They had a name for each village. And the village they lived in was cells. And the house, that'd be easy. I've got maps here I think you've seen all them maps already.
The ones that Michael has, but when we go over there, we can get them out and you can show us on.
Okay. And they'd live right alongside of each other, and the street was in the middle, of course, and the barns, the house was all in one, and the barn, all that stuff. House was in front towards the street, and you got back, you got the barns and the horses. And my grandfather, her dad, was a kind of a horse breeder, I guess, the way I understand, and she was always talking about how they had to lock up the barns. There was a lot of horse stealing going on all the time. And I guess he raised pretty good horses and raised them. And I always remember her talking about the cow herder. Every morning he'd come by through the street and pick up the cows they had. Neither one had too many cows, probably one or two cows is all every family had. And he'd pick these all up and chase them and herd them out to the pasture during the day. Then in the evening he'd bring them back in. She talked a lot about that, how he'd come by.
Did she ever talk about what school was like back there? Did she?
A little bit, but they didn't get much school. She didn't have too much school. She could read a little bit in German. She never did get to learn English over here, or learn much English.
How about Russian? Did she have to learn Russian when she was living over there?
They didn't have to, I don't think. And I don't think she knew any Russian.
Did she ever tell you what it was like traveling across the United States to get to North Dakota?
I don't remember her talking much about that. They had friends or families that kind of helped as to come over, like a lot of them did, I guess. Excuse me.
Where did they settle when they first came over here?
Just up north here someplace. I think they didn't settle right away. I think they worked in with some other families for a little short time until they got their own farms and stuff.
So did they homestead or did they purchase?
By the time they come, there was no more homesteading, I don't think. But I know the farms they lived on. In fact, I'm farming the land they lived on.
Really?
Towards the last.
So, let's see here. Your mother was 18 when she came over,
Mm-hmm.
and then your father's grandparents, they came over, but they didn't have any children when they came over.
One, the oldest one.
Okay.
But my dad was born over here.
Okay. Do you know how your parents met each other?
Not too well. In those days, I think they just drove to the yard and asked They could have the lady. I don't know. No, the only thing I know, I know he went to visit her quite a few times before they were married. That's all I know.
Okay. Um, your mother's parents, your grandparents, did you know both of them on that side of the family?
Yeah, that's kind of a long story too. My granddad lost his first wife over there, and then he married another woman
How did he lose his first wife?
through childbirth, I guess.
Okay.
That was kind of a sad story too. My mother always talked about that because she had twins, and she didn't make it. And then these girls, like my mother, and she had an older sister, the two was only two bigger girls. Said then all the workload fell on us.
How old was your mother when that happened?
Well, I have to guess now or look back. I suppose she was 10 years old, maybe, or something like that. She talked about that quite a bit, how the hard times they hit. And then this lady was kind of a maid or something and come in. In fact, it was the first wife's sister. She'd come in and help out a little bit, and before you know it, he married her. So actually, it was kind of a real mother to Ma that way.
Okay. And she's the one that came over with your grandfather?
Yeah. My real grandmother never, she was, I seen the spot where she was probably buried, but that's all over there. My real.
How old was, do you know how old your biological grandmother was when she passed away in childbirth?
I'm not sure about that. I'd have to figure it out or check it.
Do you know how many children she had before she passed away? She had the twins and your mother and a sister?
I suppose about 6,
6?
plus the twins. So there was already 8 then already.
And did your grandfather have more children with his new wife?
Then he had more, yeah.
Oh my goodness, large family.
It was a big family, yeah. I think it was 13. I have to
Oh my goodness.
go back and figure it out.
Okay. What was your grandfather like? What type of a person was he?
On my mother's side?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, average person, I guess. Like I said, I think he was a horse breeder back. Even here, I remember him having outstanding horses all the time. But in those days, I shouldn't mention this, but once they got to a certain age, they didn't do much work anymore. They graduated. Somebody else will probably tell you that too. I don't know.
They put in their...
Yeah, I don't remember him doing much work.
Okay.
Little things. When it was butchering time, he was in there helping do that. But out in the field, I don't remember him being out in the field. But the boys were pushed. It had a bunch of boys, of course.
Where did your grandparents on your mother's side live in relation to your farm? How far were they from you?
Not too far, 4 or 5 miles,
Okay.
where I grew up.
You mentioned seeing your grandfather on your father's side often. Would you see these grandparents often as well?
Probably even more so was on my mother's side, yeah.
Okay. We've talked about making sausage and butchering and then the canning. What about alcohol? Did you make your own alcohol when you were
They done a little of that way back in the early days. Yeah, that kind of fizzled out though. Yeah, I remember making a little beer,
How would you
wine,
do that?
choke cherry wine.
Choke cherry wine.
Yeah, that was something a lot of choke cherry wine. They used to go out and pick choke cherries and make choke cherry wine.
Never heard of choke cherry wine.
You didn't? Oh, you missed a lot then.
So how would you make choke cherry wine?
That's a good question. I never done it myself.
Never did it? Okay.
A certain way to do it.
Okay. You mentioned beer. You made beer.
A little bit, not much. I don't remember.
How about root beer? Would your parents make root beer?
a lot of that was done, but they didn't. Our parents didn't.
Okay. Well, since we've talked about your grandparents, what about your parents? What type of a person was your father?
He disciplined me. He made me work. Made me stay home when I was in the first grade and go out in the field with him.
In the first grade.
Yeah, I shouldn't even say that. Some people don't believe that.
So you were about, what, 6?
7.
6, 7? And had to be out in the fields working?
Not all that much, but he had to, before he seeded, he had to do this job, first disc, what you call disc. So he'd hook up all the horses in the mornings for each implement and drive them out in the field, and he'd sit me on the seat and steer them horses right alongside ahead of him. He didn't let me go far away. He had everything pretty well figured out. So I had to.
You were the oldest. He needed you out there.
Well, I guess that was the point. Yeah, I don't know, but it didn't work that much.
What was your father's name?
Frank.
Frank. And you said he disciplined you. What was discipline like back then when you were growing up? How would you be disciplined?
Well, you didn't get to run around like you do nowadays, for one thing. And you had your work to get done. You made sure you got your chores done and your work. Yeah. But he raised me, I guess, right? I don't know.
What about your mother?
She was a good mother, yeah. And she was, like I said before, the women had to do a lot of work that they don't have to do nowadays. Milking cows and all that stuff was mother's job.
Were you? What was your mother's name?
Elizabeth.
Were you close to your mother and your father?
Kind of, yeah, to my mother especially, yeah.